Hi everyone and welcome to this next lecture in the NPTEL course Machine Learning for Core Engineering Disciplines. In the last class we discussed about gradient boosting and how it is a strategy to improve the performance of weak learners such as decision trees by getting each new tree in the ensemble of decision trees to train on the gradient of the loss function, and that was because the gradient of the loss function is related to the residual, right, that the error we are making in predicting a data point, and if we can predict the gradient of the loss function we can correct the errors that have been made by the previous trees. So that was the concept of gradient boosting. So in today's lecture we will complete the concept of gradient boosting and then go on to understand a few libraries that are now available to implement gradient boosting. So let us go ahead and get started. The topic for today is gradient boosted decision trees. And if you remember what we had done, we had formulated the prediction of a decision tree, right, f hat, which is a function of the feature vector, that is basically a constant value f naught hat plus the sum over capital B decision trees, and the index of the tree is indicated by small b. So small b going from 1 to capital B times the summation of the prediction of f b hat as a function of the feature vector, right. So this is the prediction of the ensemble of trees. And capital B is the total number of trees. Small b on the other hand is the index of the decision trees. So that runs from small b equals 1, 2, 3 all the way up to capital B. We proved in the last lecture that this constant value is essentially the mean value of the samples in the data set. So that is just 1 over n sum I going from 1 to n yi, right. So where these yi's are the true values of the target variable. And small n of course is the number of points in the data set, right. So at this stage we have already specified what f naught hat is. The only thing that remains in the gradient boosted decision tree is to specify this function f b hat. How do we find this function f b hat? And mathematically it can be written as the argument of minimization over all possible functions f such that if you sum over all the data points, the loss function, right, between the true value and the predicted value from the previous set of trees plus the function f, right, if you add then this loss function will be minimum, right. So this lowercase l is the loss function for a single data point. Okay. So we are trying to find the best possible function f, right, which if added to the prediction of the previous decision tree will give you the correct value, right, by minimizing the loss of the data point, right. So that is the optimal function that we are seeking, and in gradient boosted decision trees this f, right, the optimal function is modeled as a decision tree, right, because gradient boosting is a general concept, it is applicable to any kind of a machine learning model, and here we are applying gradient boosting to a decision tree. So the kind of function f that we are searching is a decision tree. So, in gradient boosted decision trees, F is a decision tree. Okay. So, now if you remember how a decision tree is formulated, it has several regions and the average value in a particular region is taken to be the prediction of that region. So, if you have a feature vector x, the prediction of the decision tree because of that feature vector x is simply given by the sum over all regions of the terminal regions of the decision tree, the weight of that region CKB hat times an indicator function which tells whether the data point belongs to that region RKB or not, right. So, this I is an indicator function and you have encountered it many times before, right. And you would also remember that the optimal value of CKB hat, right, the optimal value, it is given as some I going from 1 to n yi minus f hat b minus 1 of xi, right. That is what we want to predict. We want to predict what is the error between the true value yi and the value that was predicted by the b minus 1th decision tree times the indicator function which tells you whether the point is in that region or not, divided by the total number of points in that region, which is simply some I going from 1 to n, the indicator function xi belongs to RKB. Okay. So, I hope you are able to understand what is happening here. This just tells you the number of points in region RKB, right, and the numerator is averaging the error, right, and this is related to the gradient of the loss function. We had proved a few lectures ago that if you have a sum of squared errors loss function, then the gradient of the loss function is simply the error that we are making, right. So, we are training the decision tree to predict the error, right, that was made by the previous decision tree. Okay. So, I hope this makes sense now, that this is the prediction of the decision tree, and then these are the weights of each of the nodes inside the decision tree, and those are simply based on the residuals, right. So, if you want to write this down in terms of the residuals, the prediction of the bth tree is simply the number of points in the region in which your particular x is lying, and then you average over, right, all the points in that region, right, based on the residuals of the points, right. So, first you have to find which region your x is lying, right. You first find out what is the region in which x is lying. Now, in that particular region you see what all points xi are there and you average the residual over all those points. So, this is the residual, right, of all points in the same region as point x, and this is very well, as you know, the logic of how a decision tree operates. Okay. Now, this completes basically how a decision tree works. However, in practice what you do is you implement a learning rate or a shrinkage parameter, because you do not want an overfitting to happen here. So, in practice what you do is, to avoid overfitting, a shrinkage parameter which is also called a learning rate is utilized. Okay. So, how this looks like is the prediction of the decision tree is written as the constant prediction plus nu times sum b going from 1 to capital B f hat b of x. Okay. Now this nu lies between 0 and 1, and this is basically the shrinkage parameter. So it decides how much, right, you are learning through the model. Okay. This is also called learning rate, right, and it is a model hyperparameter. As we have discussed in previous lectures, model hyperparameters can be optimized by various strategies, including grid search, cross validation, random search cross validation, or a Bayesian optimization of hyperparameters. Okay. Now one thing still remains, we still have not said how these regions R, K, B will be decided, but that is something we have already mentioned in one of the previous lectures, that the tree architecture is decided based on recursive binary splitting. If you remember, recursive means that we go on splitting the tree, and binary means that at every point, right, there are two regions or two nodes that emerge from the tree, and this is kept on we keep on doing this till the loss function comes down to a certain value, right, and that point we stop, and then we can also do tree pruning to prevent the overfitting of the trees. Okay. So this is how gradient boosting works, and I do want to mention that gradient boosting is a concept that is independent of the loss function used. So although we have discussed this particular concept for this sum of squared errors loss, the gradient boosting concept is more general and can be applied to other loss functions. So you need to remember that the gradient boosting concept is general and can be applied to any loss function. Okay. So now that we have completed our discussion of gradient boosting, I want to introduce some specific libraries that have become extremely popular for carrying out gradient boosting based models. So these are some libraries used for gradient boosted decision trees. And these have become extremely popular, and if you are working with tabular data in your core engineering discipline, then certainly it is something that you should look at, these kind of libraries. So whether you are a civil engineer trying to predict the properties of concrete, or a materials engineering trying to predict a materials property, or a mechanical or aerospace engineer who is trying to find out the effect of the geometry of a certain device or a certain object on the properties, right. So for this kind of tabular data, the gradient boosted decision trees are really very powerful. Okay. So these are some of the algorithms that are used, or packages that are used. The first one is called XGBoost, and this is short for extreme gradient boosting. And this came up in the year 2014. Another library that is immensely popular is called LightGBM. this is light gradient boosting machine. And was introduced around the year 2016, and finally another popular choice is called CatBoost, and this is short for categorical boosting. And this came around in the year 2017. So, as you can see, these developments have taken place over the last 10 years or so, and these are really powerful algorithms that are starting to be used. Okay. So, let us try to understand what are some of the intricate details on which these libraries are focused on. We will not go too much into the depth of how exactly these are coded or how they work, but I believe it is useful to understand how they are designed and what is the philosophy with which the developers have made available these particular libraries. Okay. So, let us first look at CatBoost. Okay. So, CatBoost is specifically designed for handling categorical features. And this is something that a lot of us who are core engineering disciplines will relate with. Many of our features are categories, right. For example, if you go to a chemical plant, the object you are focusing on, right, it can be a reactor, it can be a distillation column, it can be a flash tank, it can be a vessel, there are so many things. These are categorical features. Or if you look at a car, it can be an SUV, it can be a hatchback, it can be a sedan, it can be a pickup truck. So, there are so many different types, and these are what are categorical features. They simply tell what category your data point belongs to, and CatBoost is specifically designed for handling these kind of features. Okay. So, typically categorical features are handled via what is called one hot encoding. Okay. And what happens in one hot encoding is a vector of zeros and ones is used to indicate the absence or presence of each category. Okay. So, what you end up doing is you ask a yes or no question for every category, okay, to which the data point may belong to. So, an example could be, instead of storing, let us say you are talking about the gender of a person. So, instead of storing male as 0 and female as 1 under a single feature called gender, we use two separate features male and female in one hot encoding. And each of these features can be 0 or 1. Okay. So, this avoids ascribing rankings to certain values of features. When there is no such intended meaning, right. In the example of the cars that I mentioned, you could have every car type could be a feature, right. You could ask whether it is an SUV, and then that could be 0 or 1, then you could ask if it is a sedan, that could be a 0 or a 1, and then you could ask whether it is a pickup truck, it could be 0, 1, and so on and so forth, instead of having just one feature called type of car, where 0 is SUV, 1 is sedan, 2 is pickup truck, 3 is some other category, and so on and so forth. So, I hope you get what is meant by one hot encoding, and what CatBoost does is it actually enables you to use one hot encoding in a better manner. Okay. So, how does CatBoost achieve this? Let us go and take a look. So, in CatBoost we use an average of the target variable for all points in a given category as a feature, and we also use combination of categorical variables to enhance the model's prediction, right. So, essentially you are giving more and more flexibility to the model in terms of what features it can use. So, we do employ an average of the target variable for all points in a given category as a feature, and we use combinations of categorical variables to enhance the model prediction. And you can read more about how this is implemented in CatBoost. So, that is one type of tuning which has been done for these gradient boosted models. The other extreme are LightGBM and XGBoost. So, now let us go ahead and understand what these two are good for. So, LightGBM, which is light gradient boosting machine, and XGBoost, which is extreme gradient boosting, these are not specifically designed keeping in mind categorical variables, right. So, they work generally for all sorts of variables. So, LightGBM and XGBoost are not specifically designed with respect to categorical features. Okay. So, that is what CatBoost was done for, and in XGBoost and LightGBM this is not specifically designed with respect to these kind of features, right. However, there are other advantages of XGBoost and LightGBM, and we will now take some time to understand what these are. So, let us try to compare XGBoost and LightGBM. I will write the features of XGBoost on the left side and those of LightGBM on the right side. So, first just a little bit of history around who is developing these. So, XGBoost is developed by the distributed machine learning community, or DMLC, whereas LightGBM is developed actually by Microsoft. Okay. Now, one very important distinction between the two is XGBoost grows the trees level wise, whereas LightGBM grows the trees leaf wise. Okay. And there are advantages to both of them, right, but particularly if you look at leaf wise growth of the decision trees which is used by LightGBM, it has certain advantages and these are the advantages of growing the trees leaf wise. The first is, because it is grown leaf wise, it leads to reduced training time. You are not adding entire levels of trees, right, every iteration. So, growing the trees leaf wise as done in LightGBM reduces the training time. Okay. This also leads to better parallelization and can lead to increased model complexity due to more granularity in the splitting procedure. Okay. So, these are some of the advantages of LightGBM. Okay. Now, there is one particular point that makes both XGBoost and LightGBM different from the typical gradient boosting regressor that is implemented in scikit-learn. So, if you go and check scikit-learn, it will also have a gradient boosting regressor GBR. However, that is different from both XGBoost and LightGBM. So, how is it different? So, keep in mind that both XGBoost and LightGBM use a histogram based strategy for finding the cut points. If you remember, while training a decision tree, there are cut points, right, at every node you have to find what is the optimal feature cut point combination. So, XGBoost and LightGBM use a histogram based strategy for finding these cut points as opposed to the simple gradient boosting in scikit-learn, which simply relies on sorted lists to find the split points, right. So, here you have sorted lists, you just look at what are the values that are possible for each of the variables in a sorted manner, whereas in LightGBM XGBoost you use a histogram based strategy, you do see how frequently the points are are appearing and so on. Okay. There are a few more enhancements in LightGBM. I will just quickly mention them because it is good to know that. So, LightGBM has two more enhancements. What are these? The first is that it employs something called gradient based one sided sampling, which is shortened as GOSS, which speeds up the training procedure. Okay. So, essentially what is happening here is that points with large gradients are used to train the next tree, but only a randomly selected fraction of points with lower gradients are used. So, what happens here is all points with large gradients are used to train the next tree. As you know, in gradient boosting we are trying to predict the gradient, right, or the residual in the next tree, but only some randomly selected fraction of lower gradient points are used. And now hopefully you can see why it is referred to as gradient based one sided sampling, because you look at the gradient and then you do one sided sampling. You select all the points with the large gradients, and then the points with the low gradients you only select some of them, because you do not want to waste your time training on the low gradient points which are already fairly well predicted. So, this speeds up the training a lot. And the other interesting feature that is present in LightGBM, this is called exclusive feature bundling. EFB. So, what happens here is that features are combined or bundled, right, to speed up the training. Okay, so that is what is happening in exclusive feature bundling. So, this can be done if some features, right, do not take non-zero values simultaneously. Okay. So, what happens is that let us say that there are two features, okay, and then what LightGBM does is it comes up with a combined feature. Okay. So, if both of these are 0, the combined feature is 0, and if one of these features is non-zero, that particular value is taken in the combined feature. Okay. So, this can be done if the features are exclusive, right. So, this can be done if features are exclusive, meaning they do not take non-zero values both at the same time, right. So, this can only be done for features that are exclusive of each other. So, that is why it is called exclusive feature bundling, EFB. Okay. And this really can speed up your training procedure by a lot, right. So, when two features are simultaneously 0, the combined feature is also 0, right. However, when one of the features is 0 and the other is non-zero, then the feature takes the value of the non-zero feature, right. So, this can be done if the features are exclusive, and this speeds up the training. So, these are two of the things which are implemented in LightGBM. These can seem as small enhancements or small tweaks, but it really helps when you are trying to tune a machine learning model, right. And finally, before learning, I just want to show you a small schematic wherein you can see the difference between level wise growth and leaf wise growth. So, level wise growth is used in XGBoost, whereas leaf wise growth is used in LightGBM. By that what I mean is shown in the following schematic. So, let us draw out these. Okay. So, if you look at XGBoost, which does level wise tree growth. So essentially if your tree looks like this, in the next stage it will look something like this, right. It will have grown by an entire new level, right. You can see that one whole new level has been added. So this is level wise tree growth, whereas if you look at LightGBM, which does leaf wise tree growth, here the trees are simply grown one leaf at a time. So then at the second stage this leaf may grow, and then in the third stage one of the leaves may further grow, right. So you can see what the difference is in between leaf and level wise growth, and this also makes a difference in the speed of training of these gradient boosted decision tree models. So this brings me to the end of the present lecture. In today's lecture what we discussed was in detail the concept of gradient boosting and how it is very valuable in making ensembles of decision trees that learn from their mistakes and correct the residuals that were encountered in previous trees. We not only learned how to mathematically formulate the gradient boosting concept, but we also saw how there are 3 different packages, CatBoost, XGBoost and LightGBM, which are particularly useful in this class of models, and we discussed how there are fine tweaks that have been made by the developers to get the best out of all these models. So I hope you learned something new in this lecture. Thank you for joining, and I look forward to seeing you next time.